Okay, the next part of the brain is DIENCEPHALON. It is an oval structure in the midbrain. So the brain, it's an oval structure there. Okay, it comprises of the thalamus and the hypothalamus because they are the ones which control different set of things. Okay, so we'll just move on to thalamus. It's related with the perception of and interpretation of temperature, touch, pain and pressure. And you must have seen this one here. This is not genetics. This TTPP, temperature, touch, pain and pressure. That's how you can memorize that very easily. TTPP, thalamus, controls temperature, touch, pain and pressure. Okay. Or perceives temperature, touch, pain and pressure. Perception. Okay. And the next one under DIENCEPHALON is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus controls thermoregulation. That means heat of the body. Body heat. How does it do so? It does by making the body sweat, and it can also raise the body hairs in order to trap more air and insulate the body. It can also make the body shiver to generate a little bit of heat. So all of that is done by hypothalamus under the process of thermoregulation. And the second regulation it does is, or it controls is osmoregulation. Osmoregulation means the amount of water and salt, the proportion of salt and water inside a body. That's osmoregulation, and the kidneys have a very important role to play there. Apart from thermoregulation, osmoregulation, it also controls hunger and thirst. You know, we often become hungry at a certain time, and thirst, the level of water when it reduces in the body, it's the thalamus that urges us to, drink. Sleep pattern. We've often noticed that at a certain time when we begin to feel very sleepy, because that's the time when we normally sleep. Okay, so all of that is controlled by the hypothalamus. It also controls the production of hormones. Hypothalamus is not your endocrine gland, but it controls a lot of endocrine glands, especially the pituitary gland. And you must have done what feedback mechanism is. It controls the amount of hormones produced. So it does so by this mechanism known as the feedback mechanism. And feedback mechanism is controlled by the hypothalamus. So these are the two different parts and the things that they do or perform. Those are the functions. Okay, that's DIENCEPHALON. We move on to the next part known as the brain stem. So this is the part that we are talking about, brain stem. It comprises of two parts again. I failed to write the second one. Medulla oblongata and pons. Medulla oblongata is the one. So brain stem is the lower extension of the brain, and medulla oblongata is the structure right above the spinal cord. So spinal cord is here, right above it, the swollen part. This is your medulla oblongata, and then on top of it you have a circular structure known as the pons. Okay. So what the medulla oblongata does is it controls all vital involuntary muscular activities. Now, we said that breathing is an involuntary muscular activity. But you may say that, somebody might point out that you can control your breathing while you're swimming underwater. And sometimes I can also hold my breath for a while and then decide when to let that air out and take in air at my will. But that's just for a moment, just for a short period of time. After that, again, the medulla oblongata takes over, and it's the medulla oblongata which begins to regulate the amount of the rate at which that I should be breathing, taking in and throwing out air. So that's what the medulla oblongata does. Next is blood pressure. Blood pressure is maintained by vasodilation. That means making the blood vessels wide. I mean the diameter of the blood vessels wide. Vasoconstriction is to constrict the diameter of the blood vessels. So when vasoconstriction occurs, less blood flows. Vasodilation makes more blood to flow. You can easily notice this on your face. When you become red, it's vasodilation. A lot of blood begins to come to your face and the face turns red. When you are in a state of shock, vasoconstriction occurs. All those blood vessels, constrict or become narrow, and suddenly your face appears pale. Okay? So that's how blood pressure works, or the controlling of blood pressure works. And the rate of heartbeat. Now, in order to understand this, I've done a structure of the heart here, myogenic heart. We know that the human heart is a myogenic heart, meaning the auricles and ventricles. On the right auricle, on the roof of it, you find SAN, okay, also known as the pacemaker. This is the one that actually generates the impulse so that the heart can beat. So impulse generation is done by the heart itself. It is not done by the medulla oblongata. Please understand this. Therefore, it is called a myogenic heart. It is a myogenic heart because the nerve impulse is generated by the muscles itself, as against a neurogenic heart. Neurogenic heart, the impulse for the beating of the heart is generated by the brain. But in humans, myogenic heart, and the impulse is generated by the pacemaker. But the rate at which this generation of the impulse needs to be, conducted, or the rate at which generation of the impulse is controlled by your brain and the medulla oblongata. Okay? For example, if you're just sleeping, you find that your heart is going to beat very slowly. But when you wake up and then just run a flight of steps, then your heart begins to pump at a very fast rate. So that rate is controlled by the brain. So that's what I wanted to bring forth here. So medulla oblongata has all those vital involuntary muscular activities, controls vital involuntary muscular activities. Then we move on to the next part of the brain stem. It's called pons. This is just a place where nerve fibers from the left hand side crosses over to the right hand side of the body, and from the right side of the brain to the left hand side of the body. So this part where it crosses over, that's pons. And these nerve fibers are called corpus callosum. It's often asked with corpus luteum. This corpus luteum comes from your reproductive structure. Female reproductive structure is the yellow massa cells which secretes progesterone. Okay? Corpus luteum is present in the ovary, whereas corpus callosum is present on the brain stem. This is the place where nerve fibers cross over. Okay, so this is the difference to be remembered. Often asked question, callosum and luteum. Alright?